over with the script. Please, Charlie, start from the beginning.
We'll start from the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Sindel. I'm chairperson of the Webster Groves Plan Commission. We are a 9-member board of citizens appointed by the city council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the city council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating in person or via teleconference, we have a few other representatives of the city I would like to introduce. Council member Pam Bliss, City Attorney Neil Brunschweiger, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, Planner Danny Gendusa, and Denise Pileski is our recording secretary. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monthly meeting of the commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff if they have a question or would like to express their opinion by clicking on the raise hand feature on Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment. When you make your comments, we ask that you be as concise as possible and not repeat a point made by a previous speaker. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. One person who is a spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes to comment. When all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any questions that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the public comment section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. At that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there'll be no additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Our recommendations are sent to the city council. In most cases, the city council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the Plan Commission takes a vote tonight, the city will likely take up this issue at its first meeting next month. If you want information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact staff at City Hall. Ask the secretary to read the first item on the agenda. You, back to the secretary.
Sorry, secretary. First item, approval of minutes, August 9th, 2021.
Any comments on the minutes of the August 9th, 2021 meeting?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I had a comment, two actually. The first, let me get that page. I'm sorry, I had that on under the stream buffer. The slide that was presented, as I recall, was a little different than that reads. And I take some exception to what's included in the minutes where it says that particularly the word override, especially as related to MSD and FEMA would override the stream buffer ordinance. What was presented, I think, in the slide was about the city may grant a variance if the 401-404 was provided. So I would say that's a different statement than what's included. That's about 6 pages in on my copy. This part, the stream buffer part. So that's my comment, my concern. I don't think that's what was said on the slide. That's what was said in the handout, but I made the comment at the time. I thought that the slide presented it much better than the staff report. And I just take exception with that.
So Mike, are you making a motion to amend the minutes? Or are you simply commenting on the minutes themselves?
I would like that to be amended.
All right, so that would then have to be in the form of a motion, which will then have to be seconded and voted upon on a roll call vote. If you all recall it differently, again, that's what you have to consider. But if someone seconds it, you can have further discussion on what you recall, and then it requires a vote. Or if there's no second, it would fail for want of a second.
What do you want to do,
So-
Mike?
I apologize a little bit. I'm having trouble following with my captioning here. So I guess I'll make a motion to amend.
And I think you need to read exactly where that amendment would take
Okay.
place and exactly what it is you want it amended to. Did you hear me okay, Mike?
Yes, sir. Just give me, if I can get a second. So like I said, I'm about page 6. Page 6, under the heading stream buffer, the second sentence in. Those overlapping agency have the ability to override some of the city ordinances that were put in place to meet those same agency development requirements. And I guess the sentence before that, the proposed plan identifies changes to the creek area, which will involve discussions with FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, Missouri Department of Natural Resources, DNR, the Metropolitan Sewer District, MSD, and the City of Webster Groves. And then the sentence I read previously. I will.
So again, Mike, you have to be specific as to which sentences, maybe everyone else.
Right, that's the two I'm talking about. The two I just read.
So the sentences that read, those overlapping agencies have the ability to override some of the city ordinances that were put in place to meet those same agency development requirements. Staff will require the applicant to obtain development approval and permits from the above agencies prior to the approval of any building or land disturbance permits. Those two sentences?
Probably just the first one. If we put
So
city ordinance allows variance to be granted to the stream buffer when a 401, 404 permit's provided.
Are you saying that's what was said and the minutes are inaccurate, or they don't include something that was said?
I recall the slide saying more specifically that, yes, that's what was said, that they would need, the city could grant the variance if the 401, 404 permits provided. And at the time I remember commenting on it because I think that's a different statement than what is said here. And what is said here is incorrect technically.
So Mike, the way that our minutes are pretty generalized. They're not word for word. And we do always include the PowerPoint as another element of our minutes. So what I would ask is, would you prefer that we strike the second sentence? I mean, the first sentence talks about all these different overlapping agencies do have jurisdiction. The second sentence, I think, is where you have the concern. So would you like us to strike the second sentence, and then we can make a reference in the minutes that they need to look at our PowerPoint for further details and information?
That will work. It's that word override that's really giving me heartburn.
So I
that
want
would
to make
work.
sure the motion's clear. Okay, so what you're asking to do is to strike just that one sentence in its entirety.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then I believe reference to the PowerPoint, the way Merle worded it.
If we want to make a motion that you could add to the front of the minutes to reference the PowerPoint from the evening for additional information on our minutes, it would probably, I don't have an issue with that.
Well, it's Mike's motion. I don't want to make a motion.
So is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
And now it requires a roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
So as I understand it, it's been moved and seconded to remove the second session under stream buffer, and then to make a reference to a slide or slides at the beginning minutes. Is that, am I following this correctly?
Staff presentation. Staff presentation
Minutes from the staff presentation.
Yes,
From the staff presentation, okay.
we can make an exhibit of staff's presentation with the minutes.
Any discussion?
I wasn't here, so I don't know what I'm saying.
I'm sorry, we're eliminating just the second sentence.
We're voting.
Yes.
I know, I just wanted to be sure before I wrote that.
Right. All right, so all those in favor of removing that second sentence and making a reference to the slides presented by staff, beginning of minutes, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? All right,
And Charlie, will you make note that because Steve was not here, he recused himself from voting on the minutes?
you want to do a voice?
No, I just want to make sure that that's in the record, just so that it's accurate of how many votes we had on the minutes. Or on this item. Is there, Mike, was there something else you said?
That was a big thing. That was a big thing. I did have a question. There was discussion in the minutes towards the end about if they drop a building, the office building, they'll have to add the number of housing units. I don't recall that discussion. Was that had?
I think you're referencing the new report and not the minutes.
New report. Okay.
Okay,
okay,
so
correct.
I think with that amendment, did you want to take a vote on the minutes? I know you voted on the amendment. Would you like to vote on the minutes?
I want to know if there's any other,
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to vote on the minutes as amended. Approve the minutes.
second.
as amended.
all right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as amended. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, next item on the agenda, please.
Next item, public comment.
Any members of the public want to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda tonight? See or hear anybody? Next item.
Next item, public hearing, 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill. An application by SG Collaborative LLC for a change of zoning from A4 7,500 residence square foot, 7,500 square foot residence district. E1 multiple family district, E industrial district, and PC plan commercial district to PC plan commercial district on an approximately 15.1 acre tract of land located at various addresses that have been
Well done.
entered in the record. Okay.
So we wanted to highlight a couple key items in your latest Plan Commission report. The slide that you see before you is just a reminder of where we are in the process. We had been jumping around a little bit as we were addressing a lot of the public comment that had come in. The last couple things that we wanted to highlight were a couple items in the Plan Commission report in terms of our zoning analysis, that we are available to answer questions on staff recommendations that were also in your packet. And then you get to make a determination based on what other items, what public comment you might still be taking and whether or not you wish to close the hearing. So that's the next items that sort of flow through this chart. So the items that I wanted to point out, the Plan Commission is looking at a planned commercial district. And just as a reminder, the planned commercial district allows for integrated mixed use districts. It does not include any regulations. The regulations are developed through a plan that is brought before the Plan Commission. And then that plan generates those regulations of if you are going to allow certain uses, what regulations should you put in place to allow said uses for that mixed development. So I wanted to put that up on the slide to remind you of that. So in the report, we had identified a couple key things that were changes from the last time. We did clarify, there's been a lot of change with COVID, with people asking for things like pickup windows and pickup areas where things are pre-ordered and prepaid for. And so that's really not ever been addressed in the zoning ordinance. So we wanted to clarify that pickup windows could be something that could be in that is different from a drive-through window. We also clarified, because I know there's going to be some questions about where food trucks are allowed, it would follow the city code. Those are the key things that changed in uses. The only thing that changed in dimensional setbacks in regulations was the setback from Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. We clarified in looking at the development plan and addressed where the service road was going to be. And so that's the only thing that's changed since we last presented before the Planning Commission. Regulation of height, we had been looking at different ways to clarify where the height would be measured from. In our previous packet, we had identified and showed different setbacks from the central road, setbacks from the other side of a building, different elements, and it became clear that it actually made more sense to measure it all from one central location, which then identified the maximum height and further clarified, made it a little bit easier to understand. So we took the central street location and stated anything that was north of the central street in terms of the taller buildings, anything that was south of the central street would give us a number of stories and height in feet. And then a clarification that the townhouses that were being proposed are meeting the other residential codes within the city of 35 feet and 2.5 stories. There is that clarification. There's still cooling towers, chimneys, other mechanical equipment. Those items can go on top of the building, and then the screening that is required for those would be approved through the Architecture Review Board. We also wanted to provide a clarification for those of you that had seen the presentation. There had been some questions. Staff had some numbers that had been flipped in our charts. So we wanted to clarify the items that we have identified in terms of the numbers of acres, the total lot coverage, the total floor area. It ended up identifying the numbers pretty close to where they had been before once they were clarified with what was needed. The floor area ratio relates to the area of the adjusted gross floor area. So that identifies all usable areas of the building, appurtenances, but it does not include underground spaces and garage spaces. And it doesn't include, or it doubles any spaces that are over 16 feet in height. So using that floor area ratio and the clarification and confirmation on the size of the overall acreage of the lot, it puts a floor area ratio at about 1.45. In addition, the lot coverage stays at around 26%. And if you take a maximum number of units and divide it into the total square footage of the lot, it provides a minimum of 728 square feet in land area per dwelling unit. That's a calculation that is provided in other areas of the code, which gives a minimum amount of land area per each unit. It helps identify how many units you can have per land area. We used sort of the worst case scenario amount of units, which was tying in that they wouldn't build an office building and wouldn't build a hotel. If they build one or the other, that land area per dwelling unit will actually increase.
Mayor,
We also wanted to identify that we were looking at access, circulation, and traffic. We've added some additional elements in regards to the Public Works Department provide us some comments regarding traffic signals, timing of when traffic signals would be needed per the traffic impact study, and also the identification that we need updated traffic counts to be provided during the final development plan stage. Hopefully at that point, we would get past some of our lowered numbers due to COVID. The school district is back in session with kids in school. We also have the university back in session. So all of those elements that when they would get to a final development plan, that we would want updated traffic numbers. There was in your packets a floodplain development study. You had in that packet the documentation, which included the summary, executive summary of the document. The document is a few hundred pages, but we have it available. That is the document that has been provided both to the city and MSD to start review on the flood study for that particular area. And so that was it for our highlights of the key elements in regards to staff's report. And both Danny and myself are available for questions.
Yeah, Mara, on that slide where you had the floor area ratios, that does not include the parking and the building footprints?
That is correct. It's only building footprints because in the floor area ratio, it is only the building square footage and all levels of that building. And the definition of adjusted gross floor area does not include basement levels, garage levels, and basements are not counted in the square footage. And that's the same as how we count single family homes.
So these things have these proposed buildings have the slope. Those two lower levels that aren't parking, are they counted in that ratio?
All of the square footage that was being used for the business spaces, as well as any residential spaces, was all counted in the square footage.
I have a question.
Yes.
I saw this report about the fire department needing a new ladder truck. Can you tell us what's that all about?
So there was a conversation, the fire department did discuss with the developer what they would need in terms of fire codes, how it's sprinkled, and then whether the current trucks that we have would be able to do a rescue for someone that is in a building as tall as this. So yes, if these are built, a larger ladder truck would be needed in order to access and safely be able to rescue someone in a structure like this.
And that they said an estimated cost of $1.5 million.
Yes. I do not have something like that. My understanding, and again, I'm trying to think through, we are currently at, sorry, Maddie, could you go ahead and speak into your microphone with your last question?
Sure, I just asked if there was like an existing height that we knew our fire department could currently handle.
I know they can currently handle the structures that are here within the city of Webster Groves. And I know that we do have 4-story and up to 5-story structures. But I would not be able to answer that question without the fire department to clarify.
We have 60-foot structures, don't we?
I don't want to say specifically, I know that Bethesda Old Orchard is one of our tallest structures, but we do have a couple others that are almost as tall. We do have we currently have the Novus building, which they are able to service that structure, which is pretty close in terms of overall height. I think the height is it's the question of the height from the other side. If you have to access it from the downside of the slope is where their concern is.
Mara, the top of the building, they're allowed to go 15 feet above that. Is that how I'm understanding that?
That is only for equipment. So for example, this is a similar code regulation that we wrote into the code for the major educational campus zoning. So the newest building that was built at Webster University. The building itself meets the height requirements, but in the center of the area, they had some larger fans and HVAC equipment. It's in the center of that structure, and that was allowed to go the extra 15 feet, and then you had to have screening around it. So you can put additional appurtenances on top that deal with the mechanical, equipment and other things that are related to the structure. But that does not mean that you can go an additional 15 feet and screen the whole thing around. It's just for the appurtenances and mechanical equipment and other items.
Is that going to be seen from the street?
If it is able to be seen from the street, then that's when the Architecture Review Board determines whether it has to be screened. And in the case of the one at Webster University, it was not able to be seen from the street, but they added some additional screening to it, or to architecturally integrate it and make it not, if you're sitting in another taller building on the campus, you weren't looking directly at mechanical equipment.
But if it's another 15 feet, so you're going to have your finished floor, and then you could have additionally, you can have 15 feet on top of that?
No, well, again, it's the 15 feet is just for the equipment. It's not another, what? Air conditioning units, HVAC, if someone got approved for a cell tower up there, it might be a cell equipment. I'm just randomly thinking through it. If there's a chimney of some sorts that needs to go on there, it's very limited.
I guess what I'm saying is that you're going to have the finished height elevation, then you're going to have the equipment on there, which is can be up to
15 feet.
another 15 feet on top of it.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
And you could potentially see that. If it was if it had to be screened, then you'd probably see it even more. It would make the building look even taller, is what I'm trying to say.
So the idea is that the Architectural Review Board reviews the screening of the equipment only, that you're not creating a whole nother space up there on top. It is just for the equipment only.
But if you put a screen around it, it's going to look like
Part of the building.
it's going to look like part of the building.
So the buildings are about the same size as what the Novus building is,
That is
and then
correct.
it's going to go 15 feet above that. That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, the Novus building also has the 15 feet of equipment on top of it already. And sorry, I'm going to try to see if I can. We do have architectural elevations for the Novus building. You can probably see it just barely, but it's also in your packet. The Novus building has additional equipment on top of it that are above the height of the structure. And it also has a flagpole cell tower that was approved through a CUP that has equipment that is screened.
This slide we got up. So you're saying from the street scene here in the middle of between those two buildings, one of the buildings is going to be 80 feet high from that street. It's going to appear to be 80 feet high, and the other is going to appear to be 60 feet high.
That's according to the draft regulations we've given you, yes.
And then on the other side of that building on the left, what is the height of that from the ground?
On the Kirkland side.
Yes, on the Kirkland side. What is that height?
I would have to go back and look at our previous slides, but we had identified it in our previous one with a height also for that. I'd have to go back and look.
If what you're drawing is to scale, it's 80 feet because you've got 5 above and 2 below.
And I want to say it is 80, but I don't have it in front of me. But yes,
Okay.
you are, Jeff, you are correct. And I'll have you make sure to talk into the microphones.
Sorry. I like leaning back.
They're having a trouble hearing anyone except me right now.
Well, the blue on those diagrams, is that the parking? The blue rectangles?
Yes, the blue rectangles are parking levels. Sorry, the gray rectangles are parking levels. The blue rectangles are commercial space.
Oh, retail, okay.
Yes, sorry, the gray rectangles are parking levels and the blue are commercial space.
Other questions?
Yep, more on stream buffer protection. I get that this was the first step in getting the Clomar started, right? And then it says, City of Webster Groves and MSD would need to approve the flood study prior to submitting. The study determines what improvements can be made and the impact it would have. So do we know, like, I know that could be a long process. I guess my question is, it's kind of hard to make a determination without knowing the answer, right? So
So they
assuming
are,
it gets through, this commission, does that go in line with council, and do they get to review that too? or-
so the way that we've put it in here is in the regulations, we're requiring that the Clomar be approved at the same time as a final development plan. So the final development plan, the next step would be it goes before a hearing before the city council.
Mhm.
When it finishes up with your recommendations, it goes to council.
Mhm.
After it's gone through a public hearing at city council, it is then going to have to come back to you with a final development plan.
Got it.
The final development plan is required to come back to you within a year
Okay.
per the code. And we've put in here that the Clomar has to be approved with the final development plan.
Okay, that helps. So when it says the City of Webster Groves in that sentence, is that who's making that approval? Is that essentially us, the P and Z, or is that council? With
So
that?
sorry, go back
No, it's
to,
page 3A, last paragraph, third to last sentence. It says the City of Webster Groves and MSD would need to approve the flood study prior to submitting the FEMA. I just don't know who's the City of Webster Groves.
so
In that statement.
the city, the Public Works Department does review
They would do.
as well as MSD. We both review it simultaneously.
Gotcha.
So they review this flood study together before it would go on to FEMA.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can point out, MSD's doesn't necessarily prove that the city is the floodplain regulator, so it's their approval. MSD's review is limited to technical support. The floodplain authority rests with the city.
Is this time to ask questions about your analysis? Or are we waiting?
No, we're not having sound problems again. There's a chat feature that seems to say that someone else is trying to chat with us, but I can't move. The chat isn't working. So we're fine. I think it depends on, worry about it. I'm just gonna leave it. It depends on what you all want to do. So for tonight, we do have the applicant is able to respond and do a rebuttal. We do still have, I think you've stated, you wanted to read at least a few final comments into the public record of items that weren't in your packet. You can decide how you would prefer to go about it.
I had a question on what you sent out today, Mayor. There was that. Along with the last few comments, there's the review from development strategies. I wasn't clear who kind of asked for that and who development strategies is.
It was a part of the development strategies study. And I just provided that because I'd had some questions from the Planning Commission members about some of the impacts in terms of height and numbers of units. So I thought that was pertinent information that would help if you had questions on that.
So that was provided from the developer in response to the questions from the
Yes.
What recourse does the city have if the project isn't completed?
So the final development plan, the way that the code reads, and actually I'm gonna read it to you, because it'll be better to do that. The zoning does not stay with the property. It actually reverts back. So hold on, let me get to that section.
Was that if it wasn't done in a time frame, or if it wasn't done at all?
So there is a time frame for when the development plan has to be submitted and approved. And then it is 1 year, that is correct. And then if the city council has the ability to then revert the zoning back, if it does not move forward in a timely manner. And I believe we put that, just to be clear, we put that in the end of the recommendations, submittal timelines. The developer shall submit a final development plan within 12 months of approval of the change of zoning.
Where are you?
Sorry, page 6 of 6 of staff recommendations, draft recommendations. And then the second item is failure to comply with the submittal requirements allows the city council the ability to consider repeal of the change of zoning. And there's a section in there that allows the city council to repeal the change of zoning should it not follow the requirements and regulations. There is also in our code an ability that should they want to vary from what has been approved in the zoning, there is a process to go back to city council, or in some cases, all the way back to plan commission, should they wish to make changes or not meet the regulations that you've put in place, and a new hearing would be held.
But that's just approval of a plan, Maura, right? I mean, if ground is broken and then funds dry up or otherwise, what's the recourse at that point?
So again, the city council still can approve a repeal. But I'm sorry,
And it would depend as well, Jeff, on the redevelopment agreement, because that's the other thing that gets done as we move forward. Once this gets to a place where a redevelopment agreement becomes the next step, we, the city, sit down with the developer and we come up with it is in effect a contract that outlines everyone's obligations and what they must do. And a failure on the part of either party obviously has legal recourse. So in the event that we would get to a situation where everything was approved and God forbid something terrible happened, there would still be certain mandatory minimums that had to be accomplished in order to move forward, but effectively it would end the project.
Okay, thank you.
What final development plan, my recollection of doing it is basically a rubber stamp on us.
only if they meet everything that's in the code. So many times when you've seen a final development plan, it's been on a CUP. And so there's some basic regulations in the CUP of setbacks and landscape plans and other things like that. So it has really been a rubber stamp because it really comes through and it meets everything. We have in here 6 pages of regulations. So it has to meet everything in those regulations when it comes before you. And if it does not meet something in those regulations, then no, you don't approve it. And you have the ability to send it back to council if it's a change that they're not planning to make to meet the ordinance. Or it would come all the way back and if they had to ask for a change to the zoning. But yes, it does feel like a rubber stamp when it comes back, but it is a much more detailed plan that has to meet everything that you've put in the regulations.
Almost like the Region Bank site before it was Regions, right? I mean, there was a couple different options, but not all of them met. They came back, but it was a much smaller scale, right?
There were 3 different developers in that case.
Yeah.
So there was a first developer who
Yeah.
started coming through. It didn't get rezoned.
Right.
Then a second one and it didn't get rezoned. And then there was a third one. Now that third one, once the rezoning was done, they came in with a final development plan that met it. So it's not exactly the same, but similar.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Mara, the information from development strategies you mentioned, is that, I've been on the road all day, was that was sent out via email today?
Sorry, I
didn't
emailed
hear.
that today, and hold on. Yes, and he's gonna send one down to you. Yeah, we emailed, no. Sorry.
Mara, one of the main issues in the it's okay. I have an electronic copy. If you don't have an extra one, that's fine. One of the main concerns, thank you. Okay. There were a lot of reoccurring patterns in the public comments, and I have some questions about a couple of them, but one of them was the scale, and we started to touch on that. And we currently have the height regulation, and that's the one I heard most reoccurring, was about the height of the buildings at 80 feet. And I just wonder if there's any discussion about reducing that lower to match what we have in other parts of town at a maximum of 60 feet.
So that's your discussion to have as the plan commission. That is your discussion to discuss, to talk about.
But that's what the last page of this particular document is addressing, is the question of the ability, the financial feasibility of removing floors, reducing the height.
Okay, thanks. I got through only the first 4
Yeah.
pages of this.
The last page addresses that question.
I would take, yes, that last page, and that's what I asked about earlier. I would respectfully submit that last page as a particularly good study in circular reasoning. It makes the case we need, it's really expensive to build all our buildings. So we need to be the buildings so big to get back money because they're expensive to build so big. I was what I got. I don't know if my last comment came through or not, but
It did.
It did.
and I guess I too would share the concerns about the height. That's one of my biggest concerns here.
So your concern was the height, Mike?
Yes, and the last speaker just talked about those concerns being raised by the public, and especially on that downhill side where it is 80 feet. It's just bigger than the other stuff in the city, and that's going to be substantial.
Mara, I had a couple questions myself regarding the uses. We have car wash and oil change facility as allowed.
As accessory.
Excuse me,
Yeah, as accessory
accessory to,
to any of the buildings. So there are a lot of buildings nowadays that have amenities for their tenants, whether it's their office users or the tenants that live in a building. So there are elements where they get their oil change, someone comes and takes care of things for them at their building. So it would only be for tenants of the structure and not for just the general public.
Okay.
And I think there's a clarification. If you go under the chart, we tried to provide thought a clarification. B, additional amenities that are exclusively for the tenants of the building and not available to the general public are considered accessory uses. And then we wrote, these amenities have not been listed in the chart above, but include a swimming pool, a community garden, car charging stations. So similar to a couple of the others that might have been problematic if someone did not understand that they were accessory only. So that's why we had them as accessory only, that someone could get those things done in the garage per se of their building, but it would not be open to the general public to have that done.
Thank you. And regarding the traffic study, updated traffic counts should be provided post-COVID. What would the ramifications of those findings potentially be if something's already approved?
I think the idea was that it will verify that their numbers are correct. If it does not verify that their numbers are correct, I think that the city council would need to take action in terms of verifying that maybe it not as much could be developed if there are issues with the traffic.
The belief is that that is an accurate study, but there were people who said, well, what about? And so again, with an idea towards addressing as many questions as one could, the idea was we will address it a second time. But the belief is that that assessment in the first instance is going to be accurate because it's based on a much larger algorithm than just Webster Groves.
I'm just sorry, I'm gonna make sure if you cannot hear the echo, yeah, check and make sure your microphone's on with the green.
Yeah, Tony, I think you have
Tony,
to
you take your
like
mask
have
off.
it in your
You're good
face.
Okay, all right.
I can hear you in the echo now.
Okay, just a comment about some of the staff analysis.
Yes,
I just wanted to just make a note that, you know, apartments and this kind of development is encouraged next to commercial development. That was in the report. The community policies part of the the comp plan also says they should be permitted or encouraged adjacent to the commercial areas. But it does go on to say that particularly when the design permits owner occupancy, i.e. condominiums, and only when the units are adequately in size, 1,000 square feet or more, and the project's amenities permit a lifestyle similar to that of other parts of the city. I just wanted to clarify the whole sentence that's part of the comprehensive plan. I also wanted to call attention to in the land development section of the comp plan, it says basically when it's not possible to, when it's possible to develop in the floodplain, when it's not possible, the best use of land use would be for clustered single-family residences or townhouse projects, which will leave as much of the valuable open space as is possible in its present condition. Just wanted to put that in the record that is in the comprehensive plan.
Anybody else have questions of staff?
I have a couple more questions. Another one of the reoccurring issues that we heard in public comments was about the environment. And I did see that one thing that was required was that recycling be made available, which is good. But just wondered if there was a possibility to look at something like requiring composting be made available too. And if there's been any talk about like a mandated use of solar panels, if that's even something that could be considered as part of being under our purview.
so if you would like to put those kinds of additional regulations in, that would be up to you to make those amendments. I know we have tried to work with some of our existing areas with composting for commercial areas, and it's been difficult because it's already built. So this would be something that could potentially be encouraged to do composting, and it could be encouraged to use solar panels. We could see what we would need in terms of, I haven't thought about it as a requirement, but yes, we could, you would just need to make that amendment. Okay. Thank you.
One last question about process, Mara. So is our decision going to council as a recommendation, or does it not get to council based on our recommendation?
It goes to council based on your recommendation. So your recommendation moves forward to council, and they have another public hearing. in regards to you've moved forward. And it moves forward no matter what your vote
Right.
becomes.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes,
With our vote, if there's 5 negative, then it takes a supermajority of the council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
you are correct.
Should the, or maybe should isn't the right word, can or should the use of TIF have any impact on what's before us?
No, this is a completely separate process. You are looking at rezoning and the use of the land and any development regulations based on what uses you may or may not approve.
And Maddie, just so you know, TIF also doesn't look at what you do. So you have very specific duties. They have specific duties. Architectural Review Board will have their specific duties. Everybody's are different.
So you're saying that we can't consider TIF or special tax districts?
I'm saying that's not in your purview. That is not in the documents that are before you.
Okay, thank you for confirming.
What does it have anything to do with the welfare of
Charlie?
the community?
Charlie, can I just make sure you speak into the
Does it have
microphone?
anything to do with the welfare of the community, TIF?
So you have, your consideration is for the uses that are presented and the restrictions related to them. A TIF is an entirely different question. And you haven't heard anything on TIF. So again, other than people know it's out there and people know it's something that's being considered. So again, if we look at it just in terms of what's the record before you, Charlie, I would tell you that it's not in front of you, nor is it something that it suggests that you should contemplate. If that were the case, why would you have a TIF commission? And I don't mean to be flip, don't get me wrong. I'm just pointing out that you have very distinct duties. That's theirs, and yours is not that.
You know, I've been struggling with that whole thought, and I would certainly agree, and it'd be nice to separate the TIF from our part, but when I'm looking at the response of development strategies to why they need so much height, it becomes an economic response, including TIF. So it becomes difficult, especially when you're talking about the density, which is my concern, to separate it. And I guess that's where I struggle a little bit as committee member, where
So
that
what you're
falls,
looking
because
at-
it'd be nice to separate, but they're the one that's bringing it in.
So what you're doing though is you have to separate this. Well, you have to look at the plan that's before you. You have to look at the recommendations that are before you. There's nothing in there that recommends for or against TIF. So again, this is a situation where you're looking at the use. We had the Lorelei song there for a moment. You're looking at uses that are before you and the limitations that we would place on those uses. That's what we're talking about. TIF is not one of those things.
I also have questions of staff.
I just have one last question. Sorry for all my questions. My last question was one of the other reoccurring themes in the public comments was about traffic. And I know we've talked about the traffic studies, but I just wondered, and we're pretty landlocked there, but if there's any other ideas or thoughts of things that can be put in to make traffic, to increase the traffic flow in that area. I mean, I went around and looked at it. I don't know if there's any options around Rock Hill or Kirkham or Gore to increase lanes. And I don't even know if that's something that you could tie into this. But I just wanted to ask what if any considerations could be made there?
So I would want to ask the Public Works Department. They did not comment on something like that. They commented on their review of the traffic study as it was proposed and what it would meet. So I can't answer that per se.
Sure.
So should we put it back to them and ask them about the traffic? The traffic is a huge concern with all the residents that are around there.
So they felt that the traffic study met with the requirements of adding the additional lights and timing them with signage for the railroad. They did not state, so I'm saying they did not specifically say that roadways should be increased or expanded or lanes should be expanded. So I don't know if sending it back to them and saying to them, give us a scenario of other improvements, they were in agreement with this set of improvements.
Mara, on the traffic study, I had made the comment before, and I wasn't clear yet. It warranted, like you say, the signals. Was the developer going to be responsible for adding the signals, and was there a traffic study done showing the impact of the signals in place? And I would comment in, I guess, on number 15 and staff recommendations that those should be included. The signals are the improvements that are warranted by their traffic study.
So I'm sorry, Mike, I was trying to, and we have put in that the signals are required now. Is that what you're stating?
Right. I guess it was a question as much. The traffic study is, as you just said, the Public Works said if they do the signals that the traffic study showed is warranted, that should mitigate the new traffic. This is what I got out of the study and what I heard you say.
That's right.
That is
So,
correct.
so is the developer obligated to put the signals in? And if so, in number 15 of your recommendations, should that be included that there's a traffic study approved and it shows the signals and the signals got to be installed?
So at this point, because we are not doing a redevelopment agreement, we're doing a rezoning. So the rezoning ties when they should be put in place, but does not tie at this point who is paying for it. That would be something, and Neil can clarify.
That's right. And so it's like the question that you had, Charlie, regarding the fire apparatus. That becomes something you negotiate in the redevelopment agreement. Who pays for that? All of that sort of thing gets addressed in a redevelopment agreement, separate and apart from what we're doing here. So again, same thing with the traffic lights. That would be something that would be part of the redevelopment agreement.
Thank you.
The traffic is a big part of the whole thing.
I understand. But again, nothing goes forward without a redevelopment agreement. So again, what you do is at this point, you're setting up a plan within which everything works, and then we negotiate a redevelopment agreement.
So Steve, I think your question is, in the draft ordinance regulations, we say that the lights have to be put in place at a certain time frame, and that they have to be working by yet another time frame according to what the Public Works Department had asked, and that they have to meet all of their specifications that the city would require if we were bidding out for them on our own. So all of that required information is in here to tie in that they have to be there. There is then still we don't specifically put in who needs to pay for that. We just make sure that we require that it is there.
So I'm sorry, I misunderstood, Steve. It will be there. It's a function of who pays for it.
Where is there? Because I'm looking at the ordinance attached today, the staff ordinance recommendations, number 15. I'm seeing traffic study. I'm not seeing it.
Go to the item right above it, the access management. Mike, it's right above it, item 14A, and then B, and then C, and then D. And it continues on with E with railroad signage.
Thank you.
So the traffic signals shall be installed. We don't know who's going to pay. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Actually, we don't put it in there, but we do know who's going to pay for it. So having said that, that becomes part of the negotiation, Charlie.
We don't.
Right. Right.
like that fire truck. Okay, any other questions of staff? Does the applicant want to say anything?
Get this right. Can you hear me? All right.
Sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name's Larry Chapman. We've met before. First, I'd like to thank every one of you for participating in the process. Phil and I are here to answer questions, so if you want to ask us directly, please do that. But I will tell you, developments like this are really challenging, and I'm grateful that you will all attempt to read through all the comments and the mountains of information you receive and make a recommendation. It's particularly challenging since most of the comments you will hear will be negative. It's my experience that people who support developments like this don't feel a great need to speak out. They think that generally assume that their leaders are going to do what they think is right and do what they think is in their best interest. So to take a step back about what we have here, all this started with the city asking and issuing an RFP. They knew something had to be done here. They issued an RFP. And so that something should happen in this area is kind of a little bit of a foregone conclusion. The real question is what, right? We were selected, SG Collaborative was selected as a preferred developer. And after many, many months of meetings, town halls, and information collected by SG Collaborative, back in September, we came up with this word cloud that you see up on the screen. And basically what that is, that's all the things we heard jumbled together. The more we heard it, the bigger the words, the less we heard it, the less the words. And it really boiled down to sustainability in the environment, diversity and inclusion, housing, the historic areas in the church being protected, aesthetics and neighborhood and local business. And that's what you should get out of all of that. And what I'll tell you is that we've addressed each and every one of these things, and I'll go through some more here in a minute. But we will have, for example, in diversity and inclusion, we will have standards that we'll meet throughout our entire development for anybody that we hire and bring it to the table, and we'll try and keep that going forward. We aren't going to touch the historic building or the church. We are focused on local business, which is really what all this density is about, because that's really what's going to count. And the aesthetics in the neighborhood are really important to us. We're trying to create a great street experience that will be something everybody will want to embrace and be part of. And then sustainability in the environment. So we have some choices. For example, every one of our buildings will have a green roof. The green roof is very important in terms of ecology and sustainability. We will look at solar and things like that, but if you put solar on green roofs, you can't have green roofs. You sort of have trade-offs. So you got to play that game a little bit, but we're going to do the most we can in that regard. Anyway, I'm going to talk about some of the things I think are positive, but I want to go back and address some of the things you all heard that are kind of negative. I think the first one we heard is that the plan is just too dense. You know, I did a little research. I was kind of surprised to find this out. Back in 1900, the population of Webster Groves was about 2,500 people. By 1960, it was 29,000 people. That's 4.2% per year for 60 years of growth. That was the boom time for Webster Groves for sure. By 1980, the population dropped to 23,000, which is about where it is today. So somehow, some way, we were able to deal with 6,000 more people in Webster Groves. I wonder why we can't do that now. Anyway.
Yeah, excuse me, if I can, Mr. Chair.
No, you don't comment now. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Anyway, we believe Douglas Hill will add about 1,500 people. If so, that's 24,500 in the community. Even if we get to 3,000, as some have suggested we might, I don't know how it will happen, that's still 3,000 less than what Webster had in its heyday of 1960. To me, that says we not only need a Douglas Hill, but even more growth in the future for that. The next thing we heard is 7-story buildings are too tall. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I just want to point something out. The area that looks tall has got to be Kirkham, because on this side, it's all up against commercial areas. You couldn't see over the commercial buildings from Lockwood to see anything. This is commercial. When you're inside our project along the new Central Street, we're looking upon ourselves. So the real area to look is over here and over here, okay? Let's look at these two red lines, just some view lines and cross sections. Would you go to the next slide, please? I think what's important is if you're sitting on Kirkham Avenue and you're looking across the street from the church is so close to the street, which is where any house or construction on Kirkham would be, that you can't even see the roof of that tall building. You look right over the top. Pretty much the same thing on Kirkham. This is a 2.5-story building, and it's not quite 35 feet. It's actually about 28 feet. But even then, all you can see is the very top of that. As a reality, the homes and buildings that could be built across Kirkham are going to largely block your view. There was some discussion earlier about 15-foot of increase on over the top of the building where the equipment would go. The primary things would be air conditioning equipment, cooling towers, or really elevator equipment that has to sit above the elevator to pull it up. Well, if you look at these angles, by the time you set it correctly, which is what the Architectural Review Committee is going to do, you're never really going to see those as a practical matter unless they're pushed out to the edge of the building. And why would I do that? It's going to screw up the aesthetics of the building that I'm trying to lease to somebody. So it really doesn't make sense to do it. It's really a practical consideration that's already in your ordinance anyway, and I think for good reason. Anyway, the option to height is to push the buildings down and spread them out because we really don't have any options on density. We can have the argument till the cows come home. That's just where we are. And in our opinion, we'd rather be a little bit higher and create more public spaces. That's really what you're going to experience here than to spread the buildings out and take up all the public space. The next comment we kept hearing was this development will make flooding at Shady Creek worse. That's just simply not true. We've given you engineering studies. Our development will be the first time there's actual stormwater management systems in place. And our engineers have developed a floodplain study. And after that study is approved, the recommended improvements are completed, the flood elevations can be expected to drop 1 to 2 feet. That's a fact. It's an engineering calculation. It's not something that we talk about in esoteric terms. While it's true that there are trees and vegetation along Shady Creek, we're not really destroying a wilderness area. That's another thing I keep hearing. I don't know how many of you walked it, but we had an arborist go out, do a very thorough study, and what we found, the trees that are there are very poor in health, and most of the vegetation is invasive and non-Missouri species. I'll also tell you that the creek is dry much of the year, and its bottom is mostly debris from storms and prior dumping. Our plan will improve a naturalized Shady Creek corridor and the bottom, plus include a small pond, which will better sustain wildlife. We'll plant new trees and other vegetation. All will be Missouri native species designed to thrive in this environment. And it'll now become an environment that we can enjoy and walk down. Right now, you can't really walk Shady Creek. When we're done with our river walk, you can. And then there's traffic and trains. Yeah, there's going to be some increased traffic. That'll happen with any new development and growth. We'll make the road improvements as needed. Whatever's recommended, we're going to do because it's our responsibility. We designed the ingress and egress to minimize the impact, specifically directing traffic away from Rock Hill, which is the toughest street. We're located on the north side of the railroad tracks, so conveniently that means in the PM rush hour, we don't have to cross the tracks, and in the AM rush hour, we don't have to cross the tracks. So we're kind of convenient to be on the north side of the tracks. I develop a lot of office buildings too, believe that COVID is changing a lot of things. We were already on a trend to have less traffic, less parking at our buildings. And what's happening now is the world is competing over workers. And the best thing employers can do for their workforce is give them flexible hours. And guess what people will do with flexible hours? They won't drive during rush hour traffic because it's not convenient. I personally believe, whether you choose to or not, that you're going to see traffic change over the next decade, and it won't be for the worse, it'll be for the better. The other thing we heard is that this development will overwhelm Webster schools. I can tell you that we really believe that people who will want to live here will be the bookends. And the bookends are Young people moving in and older people who don't want to take care of their big house, their big yard, who want to stay. And they're not going to have very many students. In fact, we learned the other day that the this new apartment over here has no students. I think it's accurate to say the school district is in agreement. The school board president has indicated existing schools are adequate to handle the new students, and the tax base will be protected and secured, and they'll start to see additional revenue right out of the gates. You know, there's also a lot of comments that were somewhat personal attacks, but I'm not going to address any of that, but that's okay. But there are some good reasons for Douglas Hill. Meaningful workforce housing. 10% are about the equivalent of 2 all apartment projects mixed in along and indistinguishable from the rest of the development will be available. Affordable is that of a salary of a new school teacher in the Webster Groves School District, so they and others who work in Webster Groves can afford to live here. It'll also offer opportunities for fixed income Webster residents to live at a reasonable cost. It offers lifestyle diversity, Class A multifamily with modern amenities and a pedestrian-friendly walkable environment that's simply not available in Webster Groves today. It doesn't exist. Then we have the pedestrian focus, which is enhanced community engagement in connection through public spaces. So we're going to bring people together through our public spaces. The gathering space that hasn't been named yet can not only host jazz fests, art festivals, farmers markets, food truck events, and so on. We hope it'll become the everyday focal point that will attract residents and visitors alike to experience interactive art and just a fun place to be. Connection with Great Rivers Greenway system so it can be walked and enjoyed, something that cannot happen now. Construction of a river walk that'll allow people to enjoy Shady Creek, which they really can't now without trespassing. Extra wide sidewalks adjacent to the streets, offering places for new public art. And even though we are pedestrian focused, we'll create lots of street parking for visitors to help park the parking available to local businesses that exist today as well as new ones. It also offers us the opportunity to tell the history of Webster Groves in this area. We're going to use physical improvements to better connect the citizens of Webster Groves to this area. Also, the City of the Arts will embrace the City of the Arts, cooperate with the Webster Groves Art Commission to preserve what we have and improve upon it. As I said, we're going to create spaces for new public art. And particularly in that regard, we are collaborating with a company, Montreal-based, Daily Tous Les Jours. Don't expect it, it's a French company. But if you Google Montreal Music Swings or dailytlj.com, you'll see what kind of interesting company this is. We think we have an opportunity to do something really special and a reason for people to want to visit Webster Groves. Sustainability and the environment. All of our buildings will have green roofs. We'll embrace solar and renewable sources, construct electric vehicles charging stations for the residents and the public. We'll provide high quality landscapes and greenscape areas with native plantings that will improve the plant quality and eliminate invasive species. We will not only provide stormwater mitigation, but stormwater quality to filter out erosion and impurities. And we'll use sustainable construction practices. We're very focused on this issue and we'll spend a lot of time making sure it's right. And then there are financial and economic implications. This project will expand the tax base in many ways. Per the development strategy report, it will improve revenues to the city immediately, and that's just revenues they can calculate. Consider this. Webster Groves participates in the St. Louis County sales tax pool based on its population. If its population goes up, Webster collects more. It's that simple. So 1,500 people would be a 6.5% increase in that revenue source. Adding people to the population also helps by adding spending power. We can't exactly calculate this, but if 1,500 new people are spending money in Webster Groves, it has to help local business and has to help city revenues. Remember the Webster Groves heyday prior to 1960. That's when all the new buildings were built and were plentiful, and it's something we're really prideful about today. What are we going to be prideful about 15, 20 years from now, or 30 or 40 years from now? It would take 4 times the development we're proposing to go back to the 1960 population of Webster Groves. Consider this. If we don't grow the physical tax base and don't add more people to Webster Groves, when the cost of for the city to provide services goes up, the only choice they have is to tax us more. There's no other solution. Development strategies took into account the impact of this development on city services. And with the exception of the need for a new fire truck, which we're going to buy, SG Collaborative will provide a development that does not strain the resources. And the reality is, by all measures, Douglas Hill development will enhance the economy significantly, not detract from it. Less than 1.5% of the land area will contribute 5 to 10% of the economic impact. Also, will we be around? Phil and I are long-term players. I've been doing real estate development for 42 years. Phil, 35. We know what we're doing. We're going to get the job done. We have approached this development in a very thoughtful way, and we believe there are so many good things, more good things and potentially bad things involved with this project. We don't see how it can't be embraced. But you all have your concerns, and we want to address them. We're here to do just that and answer any questions you have. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chapman, you've been quoted as saying that there's no, you can't change the height. You can't change the number of buildings. Is that right? I mean, that would not work for you.
So the answer is, if we can't get the density, it makes no economic sense, not to me or anybody. And that's why development strategies is brought in. There's no way to make this economically viable without it. As far as height, and there is an option to eliminate the new major street and just do big flat apartments. You could do that, and that is possible, but it's not really the right thing to do. All the good things that you're trying to accomplish, or that we thought would be the things the city wanted to see accomplished, can't happen. It's just living units.
You've said that it would take 5 years to complete the project. Is that right?
We just estimated that it'll take a year just to do the infrastructure, buy the land, move the dirt, get out the rock, balance it, and then we'd start building buildings about a year down the road. And if you think a building or two every couple of years, yeah, about 5 years in total.
So what would people expect to see after 1 year?
Well, after about a year and a half or 2 years, you would expect to see all the road improvements, the gathering space, and the first 2 or 3 buildings.
So you would have 2 or 3 buildings up after a year and a half to 2 years? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah,
No buildings up after 1 year?
it's about a year's worth of just moving dirt and infrastructure.
I'm just asking.
Yeah,
What-
yeah, yeah.
what do you
I'm
expect?
sorry, but yeah, that's correct.
The commission have questions.
I do, actually. When you received the RFP and you did a concept plan and you came into the city, did you take any, you obviously looked at the comprehensive plan, you looked at the development foundation plan, you looked at the maps, the land use maps, and the comp plan maps.
Yes.
And the development foundation plan for this area called for mixed use residential. And now the development plan wasn't adopted by the city, but they use that as a guide, just like they do the comp plan. And in the Gould Evans plan, they had a recommendation for a development, 60 to 100 units, 110,000 square feet office, 20,000 square foot retail, which to me, you had your word pop up there. That to me is more neighborhood. It wouldn't affect the flooding quite as much. And it would leave a lot more green space.
Except it's not at all reasonably economically feasible. So as long as you hold out for that, you'll get what you have today.
I'm just
Can
saying.
you tell us why that is? Can you explain that a little more? fully?
Sure. So just to acquire all that land and pay people a fair amount of money for their land is about all you could afford to pay to do this development. So now on top of that, you have to move dirt, you have to get rid of a hill that's 60 feet top to bottom. There's about another $35 or $40 million of infrastructure costs. to make the land ready to accept buildings.
No matter how the density is,
Well,
correct?
no, you could make it less by getting rid of the new central street, by getting rid of the gathering space, by just putting up apartments. Yeah, you could do that, and it would be an apartment, mixed-use apartment complex, but nothing more. Yeah, you could do that.
I mean, what if you didn't touch the hill at all?
Do what?
What if you didn't touch the hill at all? What if you just stayed south of the hill?
No, you can't. There's no part that isn't a hill. If you could read engineering drawings, there's no part that isn't a hill. From the railroad tracks to Kirkham is almost 60 feet of fall. And there's not much you can do about that. Buildings need to be on flat surfaces generally. Now we're taking advantage of some and we're going down the side of the hill. You know, if we didn't put rooms on the side of the hill, you'd be looking at the side of a garage. Well, I think you'd rather be looking at the side of residence than a side of a garage. Because the garage elements would have to go down.
So you think only 1,500 people out of 748 units? So you think only 2 people per unit? Is that what you guys?
That would be a lot. That would be a lot.
2 people per unit's a lot?
It is these days, yeah. We're generally something under that, what we're saying. Phil, you tell me, but what are you getting at?
We built 346 units.
Can you come up and speak into the?
I'm Phil Holtz with Green Street. Our project in the Grove around Warshu, St. Lucie, 72 to 80% are 1 bedroom. That's the market down there. This is probably skewed a little bit different because it's more suburban.
Yeah,
style.
more residential than,
But typically, I would say 2 bedrooms are probably 30% here. Because you get a lot of young professionals, people prefer kind of their own space. Roommates are a little more complicated. They're more interested in experiential public spaces, engagement with their community, greenways. The world is changing dramatically. The young people that are going into the marketplace, whether it's here, Chicago, Nashville, they love that engagement of being able to walkable, having places to go for entertainment and living and working and playing in one spot, not commuting, out 20, 30 miles. And part of this creates diversity and inclusion when you do it. I think that's one of the things that all communities are trying to do, is to have a diverse platform that people feel like they're welcome. So if you have a teacher here, that teacher is going to feel much more engaged, part of the community, or somebody works at Olive and Oak or works at one of the banks, that they can live in the community that they work in. When I was growing up, I never got in a car and drove to go to the baseball game or go to track or whatever. I got on my bike or I walked, and it felt like a real community. And there were always, things to do, whether it's music, a celebration of 4th of July, whatever the holiday. Here you've got the benefit of really the arts, the music, and a much more dramatic. And we want to incorporate that. That's what people are embracing, is that lifestyle that you walk out the door and you see and touch your life rather than. And what it does is really creates a much more healthy community. We're doing a lot of project with Warshu, BJC, St. Lucie. They want the fabric of that community to represent who works there. And so they've made a big effort to buy and help keep those residents that could live there, and they even give them part of the down payment if they own a house. So it's what they're doing to create these strong, healthy communities that are in transition. So it's where you see the world going. We're doing this in Boulder, Boise. We're looking at deals in Michigan, and that's what's happening across our country. You go to Austin, Texas, Kansas City, you go through Crossroads or near downtown. People are migrating to where they can touch the life that they live through work, play, and engagement, and do it without a car. That's why you see when I travel, I used to never take a Uber. Now you don't even think twice about it. You get to an airport, you jump in an Uber, or if I'm downtown and if I'm going to have a drink, usually, I Uber there.
So it's just a changing lifestyle. And I think you want to create more options for people. If you start, everything's expensive, you just don't get the full breadth of the neighborhood.
But let me finish answering the question one other way. If you want to think about it like a math problem, very few students, which means very few kids. So you basically got a couple or single. So you're going to not average more than 2 people is generally what we're seeing.
What type of occupancy would you need to be viable?
We're trying to get stabilized around 95. Most of our projects are 100% occupied.
I think I read somewhere where the L was 75% occupied.
With all due respect, the L is,
I'm not
a friend
trying
of
to
mine would say
advocate-
pumpkins and kumquats. The L has no modern amenities. The L has none of the things that people are looking for. It's just a place to live. These units will be stocked full of amenities, not just swimming pools, but all sorts of interactive amenities where people can find and do things. We bring in people who do teaching, cooking classes. I mean, you can't believe all the stuff we're doing now, which is why we need things like, we'll come and wash your car and do your oil or pick up your cleaning, things like that, because that's what people are looking for in these kind of environments. It's not just a place to put your coat. And you're doing them like crazy, Phil.
Well, we have bike storage, we have bike repair, we have dog washing, we have rooftops. So it's a much more engaged. Start your day at the end of the day.
And what demographic groups do you see living there? I mean, is it going to be mostly young people or retired people, or what is your vision?
I think we want a little bit. It's the workforce, it's the professionals, it's the local people that work within retail stores, schools that teach your children. I think that's what you want. You want as much of that slice of your life to be a part of that community. It's just health. Diversity of occupations, diversity of outlooks. It's part of what all kind of a little bit isolated. It seems to be behind going to a city that's diverse in its character. It speaks volumes as to what impact yourself.
Can you refresh, at least my memory, if not others, on, with all these amenities and everything, what the proposed or target rents will be for various size units?
We run models. We have, all this gets financed through, we have to guarantee it. Market study to start with. Economically, we've got to look at what it costs to build all this, and what are the rents. I can tell you right now, in the city, $2 to $3 a square foot. So, 1,000 square feet would be, but depends on the square footage, bedrooms.
Sure.
But what we do create is something that is really well thought out, well laid out, high finishes, open, engaged.
Can I have you, it's not picking you up at all. Can you talk directly into the microphone?
But I think a lot of it depends too on the amenities that you bring to the project. I think, as Larry stated here, we want to make this a special place that people. So it's a lot of different things that people do. It's pets, it's activities, it's kitchens, it's rooftops, it's public spaces, it's art. All those things add to an experience that feels good to your senses and kind of where people are headed here. I think if you were to look at young students in colleges, the lifestyle that they live in terms of the quality of living, the days that I went to college versus what you see today is dramatically different. And that's where the market's, people are, that's where the growth is.
The development strategies density report that was given to us, development strategies is what? Is that a company? Development strategies is a company that conducted this study? Okay, thank you. Has there been any consideration of scaling down the project and leaving some of the existing structures to make the project more economically feasible? It sounds like from the public comments, there are some places that are in this rezoning that would like to stay, like the gym, for an example.
So Larry, I'm sorry, they really can't hear you. If it's not picking up and writing words,
There,
it's doing it for me now, but now, okay, now you can hear it. Try again. Now it is. Keep talking directly into it.
so anyway, there's no way to make the building smaller, the project smaller, make it more feasible. It will make it less and less feasible. The problem we have is the land cost, which is fixed. There's a certain amount of land, and the cost to improve that land is so many dollars. We're estimating in this case about $55 million. Less units you put on there, the bigger the cost per unit. And this is gonna change no matter what you do. So the smaller, the fewer number of units makes it less and less feasible. That's just the way it is. Fixed costs don't change, variable costs do.
I think she was saying if you cut the land acquisition in half and left some of those businesses, residences, apartments there, then your land act cost is cut in half.
Thank you. That was what I was suggesting.
Except that now you have half the land area and your cost per unit hasn't changed.
But your overall footprint is half, I guess. I mean, again, hypotheticals, but. I mean, I think the other thing that oh, look.
You gotta get it to where it's coming up there.
I think the other thing that's important to remember is that we responded to an RFP from the city. And what the city asked to be redeveloped was this entire footprint. And that's what we were chosen to do. So if we now were proposing something that was half the size, it's not what the city asked for. It wasn't tied to the original plan. So just as a reminder, our plan is based off of what the city requested. We didn't roll into town with an idea to do something. We were asked to present that. On the rent question too, I would elaborate just renting apartments is a consumer product like anything else, right? Webster's tough because there's so little stock. You know, the L is really the best thing to compare to if you're in Webster. So we've done our research and feel like this is actually very competitive, what we're looking at compared to what you'd say are comparable markets would be like Brentwood or Maplewood or Chesterfield, just kind of the other St. Louis County central corridor cities. So, but it's a point in time. So if the first building's not delivering for 2.5 years, it's an ongoing process in our field.
Just a comment. Yes, the RFP was for the entire site, but you heard the town hall meetings and you've heard months of comments. At some point, did you think, maybe we need to scale this back? I mean.
So I'm gonna say this again, scaling doesn't help because the land is gonna cost about what the land costs everywhere. If you buy an acre and build 70 units or 10 acres and build 700 units, if the cost of the land is still more than you can afford, what do you do? Right? And so there's two things we've done. One is to maximize the number of units on the acre or the 10, and the other is to go down the road of assistance. Both of those things are parallel paths that we're going down. And it's really, do you want this property to be redeveloped or don't? I mean, it's been there a long time. It hasn't happened on its own. That should tell you something about how it can't happen on its own. So that's part one. Part two, Yes, we could do a big giant apartment complex like you see out on Highway 40 and just massively cover that with inexpensive apartments. What we chose to do based on what we heard is to create a main central street that has multiple buildings that are all designed differently. So you get the feeling of a Webster neighborhood where each building is different. It's not one giant monolithic uniform thing. That would cost less money too. Making things all uniform would be great, but it just isn't a look that I think anybody would want in Webster Groves.
I mean, I was just addressing his comment about,
I understand, but
RFP
they're
was
all
for.
interrelated in my opinion.
But, I mean, I think it's a good design. However, I just don't think this is the right spot. I mean, you talk about crossroads in Kansas City and Austin. That's not Webster. You know, it's, you know, you're asking for a rezoning to something that we've never seen, and, you know,
That's
something like
right.
we've never seen.
That's right.
So, I mean, you have to agree, we have to scrutinize this more than we've ever done any other project.
And we don't have any problem with that. And we're being very heavily scrutinized. We've done more work on this project than I've done on any project anywhere I've ever been in my life. And that's okay. But at some point, you either have to decide whether you want to have a change and do the things that, good things that change brings with it, or you don't want to change. And if the answer is you don't want to change, that's a solution. If there was another way to do this, you know how it would be really feel great if I come in here and say, you know what, 5 stories, no big deal, we can just do it. But we can't. It's not something that's feasible. We couldn't do it. We would never put a shovel in the ground. We would lose money so fast, it wouldn't even be funny. Yeah, you could never finance it. You could never carry it forward. And I'm sorry, that's the practical realities of life, but it is.
Anybody else have questions? Any more comments from everyone?
This is a very complicated problem that the city has. You've got an expensive piece of ground that's underutilized, and you want to change it with a lot of elements that we all kind of embrace. But you have to have a certain amount of density to get there, because it's got a lot of upfront costs to get over that starting point. The idea is, though, that I think we're about 26% coverage based on what I saw up here, which is pretty extraordinary, you know, for a denser, you still have a lot of land. I think we had 750 square feet of land for every unit. To me, you know, you put that in perspective of urban settings, that's an attractive thing, because we addressed public spaces, we created greenways, we addressed sustainability in the creek and improving the issues that are facing the city. And then we're creating options and creating economic impact that the city can benefit from. So it's one of those challenging sites. If it was a green field and it didn't have all this hills to climb over, it'd be a different task. But you got a site that's been really neglected from a lot of different angles. It doesn't meet ADA, doesn't meet, you know, just landscaping and look and feel. It's like an abandoned site in, you know, next to Old Webster. That could be a whole lot more. But it takes a different view, kind of a bigger mindset. It is different than, you know, Old Webster. But it also complements it and brings other elements that I think would make the city more vibrant. And it's, you know, the young professionals and the older, that's kind of what we've talked about as the bookends. Bringing that piece of the community, which you have in many regards because of the university. You want to keep some of those people in your community because they're here enriching themselves. Same with the people that are getting older and deciding that a big house is too much of an obligation. Those are healthy choices to be able to offer people that have been a part of the fabric of the community. So we're thinking of how do you change the site and do it in a positive way. That's how we look at it. We're not here to create something that's a nightmare. We're trying to create solutions to the future and ways to enhance the people that would like to stay here and add more dimension to that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any speaker cards? Mr. Bell. How are you? Good. We got 3 minutes.
I'm gonna have, oh, yep, there you go.
Good evening. I'm Charles Bell, Architects, long-time member, resident of Webster Groves. We've been here before. More importantly, I'm the originator of the 1997 Old Webster redevelopment plan to develop a larger area bounded by Rock Hill, Gore, Lockwood, Kirkham. Our original plans included shops, offices, parking lot, landscape, most of which you see now in the Novus development area. During a year of research development, I personally interviewed 21 developers and reviewed plans for that development. We had to abort the project when we learned that our carefully chosen developer partner accidentally became the chairman of the TIF commission. What I show here is our emergency infill developer, but it was too late. We'd already lost the project. After extensive study, meetings, communications with these 21 developers and several financial investors, here's what we learned about developing this north side. This was going to be a difficult project, and the only way it was going to be financially attractive to a developer was to destroy the buildings and displace its commercial and residential residents. Clear the site, excavate to the creek level, remove the trees, and endanger all the natural environmental assets. Destroy Shady Creek and its ability to act as a flood tributary, burden the streets, department, fire district, school district, and public utilities. Draw significant funds out of the front end of the project. This meant a TIF. And cram as many units as you thought they could get away with, or to attach it to the commercial development project as we had done and failed. And here were our criteria. The important historic neighborhood church and existing residential area would need a respectful separation. The unstable geological structure of the hillside would require its preservation, as well as the canopy trees and understory vegetation. Water runoff and flood control would require redirection, retention, and detention. Shady Creek and its extensive natural floodplain would need to be preserved. The construction would need to be contained entirely on its own site. Traffic volume, especially the logistics of both Rock Hill and Gore, were huge determinants. It can only worsen with grade changes, left turn, stall traffic, pedestrians, traffic, and emergency equipment backup at the two major railway crossings. Union Pacific, the largest railroad in North America, would need some significant protections. Here are the massive problems with SG's plan. It is disrespectful and abusive to box in the Old Community Missionary Baptist Church. And its detriment, its development would hover 7 stories over this historic Black church and neighborhood. The image here is very clear and the message is entirely wrong. This plan removes existing housing, businesses, and replaces new housing and new business. Shady Creek
Mr. Bell,
would be,
Mr. Bell, you
Yes.
need to wrap it up, please.
yes, thank you. Shady Creek would be destroyed. Mr. Chapman has described this as an ugly problem, but no, Shady Creek is actually the solution. It's a healthy creek and it's doing its job. There'd be 769 units of housing, I believe. Just to be clear and for comparison, this is the entire building stock of historic Tuxedo Park.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to let the planning commission know, something has gone, so we've been having issues with Zoom this whole evening. As you can probably see on the screen, I can't even access it right now. So Mr. Bell, if you wanted to go ahead and sit down.
Yes, thank
They're
you.
done. Thank you. So I can't see anyone with hands raised. I can't see anything. I cannot access Zoom. It's just for some reason doing the captioning. I have texted to someone who is watching. They can see our room and obviously they can hear us, but I can't access the Zoom.
So as long as they can see us and hear us, we can still proceed.
We can proceed. We could, I could try to take a break and I could try to log out and try to log back in again to see if I can access the Zoom. I know there was one hand up before we moved over. And so if there is someone that does want to speak, I could try to do that.
Well, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break? I'll close it down. So for those that are on, I'm going to close the Zoom down and open the Zoom back up again. So for those of you that are on, please come back and log back on. Thank you.
All right, just so you know, they were able to hear and see everything, at least the first.
Yeah, that's what everyone's saying. They can hear and see everything. I just can't access
I
anything.
understand that. Thank you.
And I also can't even mute us at this point.
Jesus Christ. Unbelievable. Yeah, you have lots of. That's why. From the monitors.
we'll, pardon me?
You're unmuted now.
Okay, so we're gonna start with public comments that have been emailed to you. Is that right? You received them by email?
This afternoon.
Do we want to start with the people who have their hands up that have
Okay,
not
let's do
spoken
that.
before? So
Let's do
people
that
who are
first.
here. Okay.
All right.
So I'm first going to Jessica Perry. I am changing you over to allow to speak. And once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
This is actually her mother, Karen Perry, and I'm going to read a comment for the McMillan family. So this comment is for the Rolling Ridge Nursery and McMillan Development Company. Since 1893, the Schultz McMillan family has owned the real estate and businesses at 60 North Gore. Since 1959, that business has been Rolling Ridge Nursery. Over the last 5 years, we have reinvested substantially in structural maintenance and improvements to maximize use of the large historic building. A primary concern is parking availability and traffic flow. Over time, we have purchased 4 parking lots in attempt to accommodate our customers and push parking and traffic to the west, away from Marshall Place neighbors. With the addition of the Willow Room event space, the importance of our lots is as high as ever. All 4 of our lots sit in the proposed Douglas Hill redevelopment area. Without these parking lots, where will our customers be expected to park? Will North Gore Avenue street parking be eliminated? Many of our customers leave with heavy or awkward loads, often requiring carryout assistance. We have not seen any rendering of the Douglas Hill redevelopment that answers the parking needs of our businesses. We hear the developer's criticism of the aesthetics of our gravel parking lots. We are open to any request by the city to pave and stripe some of our parking properties in a phased plan, but also note the permeability of gravel lessens the concern for runoff and remains an environmentally proficient parking surface for the given conditions. While we are generally supportive of new development projects, we do not support forcing our neighboring businesses to close or relocate. Forced closure of businesses with a long history of serving our community is not the action of a city who cares about their community. Long-term construction threatens the survivability of our business. Traffic flow is vital to our retail operation and event space. The impact of the proposed years of phased construction isn't something we take lightly. There is ambiguity of the timeline and phases of the development. It appears there is room for doubt that all phases of the Douglas Hill redevelopment project in its final form will be completed. What are the contingencies for this outcome? Will SG Collaborative purchase all properties prior to onset of construction, or will the properties be purchased according to phase? Will City Council commit to confirming the consent of all current property owners in the proposed redevelopment area and confirm a fair negotiation for purchase of their property prior to giving their full approval? Or is it possible that after City Council's approval, any property owner who refuses to sell or has not accepted the proposed purchase offer be subject to eminent domain? The proper use of TIF and the impact of other tax increases are a major concern. A proposed 1% sales tax increase raises Webster Grove's combined sales tax from 9.237% to 10.237%. This far exceeds the Missouri state average combined sales tax rate of 8.25%. With a proposed development of this magnitude, if consent of all property owners.
You need to wrap up your remarks, please.
Okay, well, I'm speaking for an organization, so I was under the impression we had a few extra seconds. With the proposed development of the magnitude, if consent of all property owners in the proposed area is obtained, we believe the correct course.
All right, that's wrapped up. Thank you.
Wow.
So can you just clarify so that those that are listening understand? An organization is not the same as just a business. So she was speaking on behalf of a business versus an organization.
Right. That's a single person, and that's the 3-minute limit, which is what we observed every other commission in every other board hearing.
So we did with everybody else. We're gonna do it the same.
So then there's only one other hand up, but it's actually Jenny Fagan. You have already had comments both submitted, read into the record, as well as submitted into Plan Commission packets. And so per the Plan Commission's policy, you have spoken already. So all of your comments have been forwarded and put into the Plan Commission packets for them to read. Is there anyone else who wants to speak this evening that has not either had their comments read in to the record at a previous meeting or spoken before? Dave, I thought you had spoken already. Do we have him on here? I actually don't have him.
David entered comment. I remember reading.
You remember reading a comment?
I remember reading it, but I thought that was to the city council.
Yeah.
I think it was to the city council. I don't have him on my list. Okay, so Dave, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks, and Plan Commission, thanks very much for your service and your patience. In the past, I've been generally critical of SGC and Douglas Hill. As such, I respect and appreciate the arguments from those residents who are in opposition. But given the benefit of time and reflection, my views have changed. I now support Douglas Hill. I do not know a damn thing about commercial development, but I know quite a bit about my 2 reasons for changing. The first is a truth that I learned long ago, that communities move forward at the speed of trust. If there's no trust, there's no progress. It's about that simple. To me, diversity of thought is a sign of a healthy and engaged community, but sooner or later, at some point, we have to learn to trust each other, to trust the Plan Commission, to trust City Council and trust our developers and come together and move forward. It's easy to distrust and kill progress. It's harder and more rewarding to trust and make progress. And for that reason, I trust not only the people of SGC, but our really good neighbors, one of which lives right down the street from me. And he's a terrific friend, a trusted friend. Second, I have spent my entire career creating and developing new ideas. Douglas Hill, like any new bold idea, it scares us. It makes us really nervous because it's so different. It pioneers new ground. And like any big new idea, it dares to break the current rules of the game. It challenges conformity and the status quo. It gets us out of our comfort zone. It takes a risk and thinks outside of our safe, predictable, and conservative Webster box to create positive change that will move our community forward. The result to me, the benefit, is real significant progress and prosperity that in turn protects the future financial security of our city for years to come. And this is the benefit that that site has not delivered for years and years and years. So in closing, Douglas Hill will occupy less than 0.5% of all the acreage in Webster Groves. Life is a risk, but to me, Douglas Hill is a smart risk worth taking for the good and future of our community. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And your service.
Any other hands before we go to emailed comments? Okay. So I'm going to read a couple emailed comments that came in since your last packet. First one was received on September 11th from Joseph Ellenbrock from 1309 North Berry in Glendale. This project is not appropriate for the area adjacent to Old Webster. Less than 2 weeks ago, Kirkham Road was a raging river due to a large storm event. This flood was 2 years to the day of another massive storm event that caused Shady Creek to flood over Kirkham, blocking the street and damaging homes along that stretch of road. This project would remove permeable surfaces. Remove permeable surfaces and mature trees from the neighborhood uphill and replace it with roofs and pavement. The project does not outline how the runoff, which already is often too great for the landscape and creek to absorb, will be stored to mitigate flooding of the Shady Creek watershed. The next comment was received today, September 13th, from Angela Newbridge on Newport Avenue. Hello, I would like to raise concerns regarding the Douglas Hill development project. Since previously raised concerns regarding the overall size of the development, increased traffic and flooding, and other environmental issues related to Shady Creek have been disregarded, I would like to bring up 2 other arguments against the development. First, the idea of extending TIF incentives to the developer is irresponsible of Webster Groves. TIFs are defined as public financing that should be used in areas that are substandard and economically underutilized that would not otherwise be developed without public investment. This is not true of the area surrounding Douglas Hill. There are existing businesses, some that have been around for almost 100 years, occupying the development space. A TIF would allow future property taxes be used to pay for the new development. If we all think back to a few elections ago, the city council proposed the addition of a use tax for Webster Groves with no real plan of how to use the money. If the council still believes the community is in need of additional tax revenue, why divert existing and future revenues into this new development rather than using it for existing community needs? Why increase the sales tax on the community and community visitors solely to replace the tax revenues diverted for this project? In the end, TIFs should not be considered for this project. Second, the development company has requested the use of eminent domain to strengthen the economic foundation of Webster. This is very concerning. The definition of eminent domain is to take private property and convert it into public use space. The development is not for public use. It would be lacking private property. It would be taking private property of one business owner and giving it to a $1 million development company for the profit-making business development. This eminent domain request is not to make space for a needed roadway or public hospital. Why abandon local businesses that have been loyal to Webster community for generations for an outside developer looking to make a quick buck? We are a quaint community. Nearly all businesses within the city limits are local. Many people do work and live here. This major development is not in the character of Webster Groves community. Take the development to Clayton. There are other comments that were put in your packet. We have not been reading comments that come anonymously. We've had a few where it's sort of a generated email address that doesn't have a name or an address, but we've still put them in your packet. So because we can't define who it came from, we haven't been reading those aloud. I have no other comments that have come via email.
Okay. So move into executive session.
I move into executive session.
Second.
Then move in a second to close the public hearing and move into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, read the first item. Don't read all those addresses.
Executive session, 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill, an application by SG Collaborative LLC for a change of zoning from A4 7,500 square foot residence district, B1 multiple family district, E industrial district, and PC planned commercial district to PC planned commercial district on an approximately 15.1 acre tract of land located at various addresses.
All right, who wants to start this off?
I just asked a question of city attorney. Could you again explain what we're supposed to be?
Sure. So the normal thing that you see, of course, is going to be your CUPs, which have a certain set of standards. That is not what you're deciding. So the 5 or 6 standards that we see commonly in a CUP question are not the same questions as are before you today. What are before you today is basically it's a rezoning, it's a zoning amendment based on what we have now, and that is a different consideration than what we see in a CUP. It is, if you look at your policies, not your policies, but your duties and powers that you are granted both under the charter and the city code, it's pretty generic. It says basically that you're supposed to make decisions that are in the city's best interests. That's what the charter says, and that's what the code says as well. It outlines your procedures, but the considerations are different. In order to understand what those considerations are, we have to look at case law that does define these things for us. And essentially what you are charged with the duty of doing is determining whether this is in the best interests of the city of Webster Groves and whether or not the use development is appropriate. So the uses as they are set forth. So what you're doing in creating this mixed use development is you're taking all uses that are allowed in a variety of different districts. Normally we segregate them, right? We have residences in a residential area. We have commercial property. We have industrial property. We have agricultural property. All those things are in their own districts. Here, what we're doing is we're mixing those uses. And so we're doing something very different from what you would normally see and deciding whether the uses that are suggested for this particular region, this particular district are appropriate. That's what the case law says. So again, there have been some recent cases that have come down recently, like the Creve Court case. People say, well, gee, what does that mean? The Creve Court case is actually a CUP case. So it isn't particularly or completely controlling on what you do here. But one of the things that is very careful to say is what you can decide and what you can't. And again, that's why when the chair raised the question of the TIF, I think you have to be very careful to stay within your boundaries. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a recommendation that will, of course, go up to city council. This is not the end of the trail. This is merely a way station upon the trail. But again, what you do, of course, is very, very important. And you will be deciding as members of the community, you will be deciding whether you think that the suggested uses with all of their restrictions on all of the various things that staff has put before you are appropriate for the city.
So can we consider density,
Certainly.
height?
Well, density to this extent, okay? Density because you don't have anything in front of you, Charlie, in terms of how many actual buildings there are going to be, exactly what the numbers are going to be. What you have is a general plan, and there have been discussions about it. And certainly in the pro forma that was put forth and in the cost benefit analysis that was done, there's information about how big this would be. But the problem that you have when you consider density in and of itself is that you're being very specific about things that aren't necessarily specifically in front of you. So what I'm saying to you there is it's like suggesting that everything have a slate roof. That's not in front of you. Might be something you want, might be something you'd want to see, but it's not something that's actually in front of you. I think what you have to focus on are all of the things that are in the staff report. So the staff report talks about setbacks. The staff report talks about a variety of items in the uses that would be appropriate in terms of regulating the actual uses. That's what you have to focus on. So again, height, yes, because height is something that's specifically referenced. They talk about how tall the buildings can be. And that is something you can certainly think about. But in terms of density, we don't speak to that in what is the proposal in front of you. Now, you can consider things like, of course, the footprint and that sort of thing, and that's on there. Those, you know, again, it's the 26%, 26.7%, I think it was, in terms of the footprint and that sort of thing, because those are things that you look for in other places. But you're also doing something different here that you're not doing in other places. So you have the ability to allow, because it's a mixed use district, you have the ability to allow things that are not necessarily done in other places. So if you were only a residential area and you were doing something like changing the height, you would have to be concerned about the precedential effect that that would have on other residential areas. But this is a mixed use. So you, again, you're combining a variety of different things, commercial, residential, all of these things are combined. Tony, did that answer your question? Sort of?
Yeah, it does kind of answer my question, but there are recommendations in here that pertain to intensity of use and height of restriction. So
to the extent that those things are in there, those are things that you can look at. To the extent that it's
we can look at them, we can change them, we could make other recommendations. all of those things could go up.
So my own particular approach to this, and this is again, one person's opinion, one lawyer's opinion about the approach. It's not necessarily a negotiating position, okay? So again, it's not, you don't get to necessarily come back and say, you know what, I don't really like the idea of this density, but I'm willing to go with this density. If it becomes sort of a negotiation. You have to, in my opinion, either accept the plan as it's submitted or reject the plan as submitted, or if there are changes that you want to make, you'd redirect those changes back to Mara, and she would come back with those changes, and you would have a reconsidered plan on those parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we have the ability to make changes.
You do have the ability to suggest changes that then get voted on, yes.
So we're doing the zoning change and then also this site plan? That's what we're actually approving, this
no.
site plan?
No,
That's
No,
It's just the preliminary plan is what is helping guide what the zoning is. They would then have to come back because right now the plan doesn't necessarily meet what's in the regulations. They would have to come back to you with a final development plan. So we are only approving, we're approving a set of regulations to guide the rezoning of the uses on the property.
Or we're not approving.
Or not,
Or not,
yeah, but
I
you're,
understand.
that's what you're voting on.
Yeah.
right.
I understand.
Well, and you kind of alluded to, this is a planned district, so it's not a straight C1, C2. So the recommendations that you have here are kind of a mix of different parts of our code. They have to be part of the code to be put in here. So I have a question of, you talk about B2 being our B2 district as being, this project kind of correlates with our B2 district. It's a mixed use and you've used the setback requirements. No, you haven't used the setback requirements. You've used some of the requirements in the B1, but you've kind of varied from some of the other things like the setback requirements.
So in PC planned commercial, you do not have to use very specific things in the code. You are generating a set of regulations. You could, as a plan commission, decide that you want no setbacks. You could put zero setbacks on every single setback if that's what you deemed made sense based on the request and what you felt comfortable with. Staff always likes to use other comparable zoning districts because we feel that it's important to give a comparison so that you can understand it. But no, these were not generated based off of other specific zoning districts.
They're generated off the plan that was given.
They're generated off the plan that was given and the analysis of that plan in terms of determining what it would mean in the code for all the other regulations that we were looking at.
In keeping with the comprehensive plan.
That it be mixed use.
We can consider whether we think this plan is appropriate for this area, can't we?
Yes.
And I guess that's what I'm really wrestling with.
Pam, are you able to comment? Tony had brought some stuff.
Maddie,
I'm sorry, I'm not close enough
thanks.
to the microphone, am I? I got too comfortable
God.
back here. Tony, you had talked about the original proposal and SG Collaborative has commented several times that this is what city council requested, what they put an RFP out for. And so I don't know if it's appropriate or if you're prepared to comment on if what the original proposal and what we have in front of us now marry each other. I don't know quite how to finish that, but
Just sign up.
line up. Thank you.
It's not appropriate for me to comment.
Okay, thank you.
But Maddie, if you would like, I can give you some of the history of what led up to this, because I think it perhaps does answer your question. This whole process began at council, and this was, I think, before Councilwoman Bliss was on the council, and it was certainly before I was the city attorney. Council made a decision that they wanted to do a redevelopment was in this area that we're now calling the Douglas Hill Project. And just like Mr. Chapman said, the invitation went out to a variety. In fact, there were 20 different developers, and the city hired an individual who came in and looked at all of these developers and said, look, you need people that have the experience, the manpower, and the money to do this project, because we've been told from day one, the difficult part of this was going to be the land acquisition part of this. And there were as many as 12 different developers that were interviewed prior to the issuance of the RFP. And of those 12 developers, 11 of them said, we think it's a great idea, but the land acquisition is going to be your problem. That's going to be and none of them wanted to bid on it because of the difficulties that were involved in land acquisition. So in terms of the scope, this has always been the scope, and the city actually engaged the services of George Stock, who was brought in to do topographical surveys of this particular site, so that when the city was speaking to potential developers, we knew exactly what it is that was going to be looked at. And so that is how this all begins. And again, from the very beginning, they notified the people who were property owners and said, this is what we're going to do. That included the church. There was some controversy over whether that happened. That in fact did happen. They were notified. And there was a meeting right in this room. I believe that Mara may have been present for that meeting, and a list was kept and information was kept regarding how that went on. So as this developed over time, and there were some things that slowed it down a little bit. Some of it was that we had significant changes on council. And now the only person that's left on council, I think, who was on at the time that this was initiated is the mayor. So again, there was a lot of conversation over time. And as Mr. Chapman indicated, the invitation went out to him and to other developers to come forward. He is the only one who saw a path to land acquisition and to move forward with this. And so the plan that was submitted by him has always been responsive to what it was that the city was requesting. Does that make sense?
And I can corroborate because I was on council. So
Okay, that is correct.
thank you.
Doesn't necessarily mean that the plan to redevelop the area was a good one to begin with.
Or what we had in mind when we
Or
went
what
out for the
council
RFP.
had in mind.
I'm only telling you what the path was. And again, I wasn't there at the time. And actually, in rethinking this, when the plan came back in, and after George Stock had done the survey, it was brought back to council as it was at the time, and they gave authority to move forward on it. So again, recognizing that there were some changes that were made, it was always done with the approval of council in terms of moving forward. Now, again, all that does is move you forward and get you more information, because there were many, many unanswered questions at the time.
I'll go, Charlie. I'll start jamming. And frankly, I've gone back and forth several times in this very meeting. And whichever way we come up with, I think we know some people are going to be happy and some people are going to be put off. I'm not concerned about the flooding. As an engineer, I know there are ways to deal with that. And trust that can be good and can actually be improved. Certainly not concerned about flooding locally because things flow downstream anyway. That's not to say we should be putting water on our neighbors, but I don't think that Kirkham is not going to be impacted by that. The traffic study, Ms. Falkenroth is probably one of the most respected traffic engineers in the St. Louis area. I take stock in what she has done. I was a little disappointed she didn't look a little closer at Marshall and Oak Street, some of those secondary streets, particularly as relates to train blockages. I know it's maybe not an easy nut to crack, but I think it would be good to have some of that information impacting those neighbors. My primary concern, and it perhaps is shared from what I've heard here, is the scale of the project. I think the graphics that Mr. Chapman showed were I will just say lacking. In a view from the street, well, if you cut a section of the church, okay, maybe the church blocks that view, but not everybody's standing across from the church when they look at the site. You've got, I think a sight line was taken at the center of Kirkham or on Kirkham. You've got neighbors across the street on the north side of Kirkham that are going to see a different view. So I guess at this point, I will just leave it that the scale is a concern for me. Permission to speak later.
Sure. Anybody else want to weigh in? Well, I've got the same concerns that Jeff has. I've been going back and forth on this for months now. Keeps me awake at night. But I am really concerned about the scale of this thing, taking 5 or 6 years to finish, the construction going on. The neighbors down there in Kirkham, are we considering what their lives are going to be like?
Charlie, I'm sorry.
The traffic issue didn't even take into account the trains. I don't understand how we can have a traffic report that doesn't take that into account. Steve, you told me how long those trains take to run through there. I don't know. I just have some real doubts about the appropriateness of this size project at that area.
I'll go next. I have a concern about the parking and whether we're even considering, giving them a parking reduction at this point, whether they can park. Using on-street parking as part of their calculated parking it's not something that's usually done. They don't do it in St. Louis County, but the traffic study is a concern. I would like that updated to, I don't know how you cannot take into account that, the train. I have a concern about the design and the interior street. I have a concern that if there is a train, that main street people are going to use that street to go down Marshall to get over to Elm to bypass the train, which is going to affect that neighborhood, which will, affect Marshall. The tree preservation, I have a problem with us relaxing our tree preservation plans. If they're going to basically take all the trees down, that's something that you couldn't do if you were a property owner and you bought a house. You couldn't go in and clear cut your property. So those are a couple of things I have. The setback requirements, the density is, I mentioned the B2 district. The setback requirements in that B2 district are 50 feet from a street right of way or 40 feet from a street right of way, and we have 10. There are 40 from the 50 from the Union Pacific Service Road. The reason why those setbacks are that way is because of the density that's allowed in that district. And so I have a concern about that. Like I said, I read before, you read the comprehensive plan and you read the recommendations. I know they're guidelines, but I don't think it's in keeping with our.
I have some concerns. I do want development there though, so I'm torn. It is probably too big. My neighbors all tell me it's probably too big. I remember when Mills, which I was for the Mills project when it was going in, and people used to tell me that one was too big. We didn't do it, but traffic and the size. are the two major things for me. But on the flip side, I do want development there. I mean, I like the trees and everything, but we need residents. So I still don't know how I'm gonna vote right now, but I just want you to know that those are all the things in my head that keep coming up, and all my neighbors keep telling me it's too big, and in traffic, I don't really think that it's gonna affect where I live, but it will affect Kirkham, it will affect Gore, and it will affect Rock Hill hugely. So, but there are traffic experts out there can figure those things out once it's become the major problem.
Looking at Maddie, I can go. Well, first of all, let me thank SG and Mara and your team for all the hard work. I know it's been a lot of time consuming on both sides. So thanks to everybody on that. It's been helpful to have questions from you, Neil, answered. So that's appreciated. I think we all have concerns. I have some concerns. Really not, I mean, it's dense, yeah. So the density doesn't concern me as much as not having enough information on some of the flooding aspects and the environmental aspects. So part of me, I don't want to pass the buck to the council because I don't want to make a decision, right? But, the other part of me, I don't want to just vote no because I don't have the information. So I'm kind of torn on that whole, I don't think I have enough information to make a vote kind of thing. Traffic, I don't know. It's like, again, I think there's a lot of information that's missing that's not letting me kind of make the vote that I want to make. So I don't know how I'm going to vote. Density is an issue. I want to see development there too. I wanted to see development where the Regions Bank went in, right? I mean, just increasing the base is great. I want to do that. But I just don't think I have enough information as presented to do that. So I'm going to have to think about it.
Yeah, Scott really summed it up. Kind of my thoughts exactly. I'm not as worried about the flooding. I think they're doing a good job. I think they're working with the right organizations. I think they'll come up with a plan that will make that better, not worse. I do share the concerns about the environment, and I think I would have to look back at these just a bit more to. There are things in the plan, definitely. I like to hear that we're using all native plants. I don't know that everything follows back there. And I walked the site today. Like many of you, I just feel very torn about some of the issues. I agree. I want to see a development there. There was a reason that was requested, but I am worried about the scale, and I am worried about the traffic.
You want to go online and see if they
Michael?
Thank you. I think I just reiterate a lot of what was said. On the traffic, I do think they have a distinguished traffic engineers, well respected, but I never did see a real response to my question. And I have concerns about if that queue, say when a train goes, is 20 cars long, what happens with that queue gets 40 cars long, 50 cars long, how much longer does that get? And somebody mentioned Main Street, what happens there? So I just not seeing what that queue happens. The height is a concern of mine. The flooding, well, I can see the HECRAS analysis by stock. I know it doesn't include a HEC1 and they want to tear that bridge out. So yeah, you can lower the local flooding, but you may just pass it downstream. This is why stream setback ordinances exist. So you don't do that very thing, and that's what this region does. So yeah, I think there's no doubt you can build a couple retaining walls and get that flood level down right there, but what are you going to do downstream? And this is just what happens. So yeah, I think the flooding, varying that stream setback, the traffic and the height are concerns, but I do, if they can get something like Cortex or something in there, you know, I wish them all the luck. So I'm like a lot of people torn on that.
Annie?
Hi, yeah, I've written a lot of notes over these past public comments for several weeks now. And I don't think we can say no because they're gonna have to go through so many with the ARB and just the city council, like more requirements. I want to see what comes of this. I'm excited for new development. I'm always excited for new development, except like banks and things like that. I'm done with that. But I'm excited about the possibility of this community space and the environmental concerns, like Maddie said, that's huge to me. But like Maddie said, the native plants, and I hope that they can maybe work with like the Sierra Club, so that we wouldn't get rid of the owls that are there and the Sugar Creek area and things like that. And the flooding, there's there's ways to go about that. Obviously, that's a big deal, but I mean, there's engineers to do that kind of thing. So traffic, we always talk about traffic, but I don't think that should be a reason to stop this. Traffic is always an issue. I feel like we talk about traffic all the time. And I understand, but I really do want to see what becomes of this. I don't like the eminent domain and making people move like the St. Louis Gym Center and Red Lemoore. And I have a friend who has a business down there. I'm I'm concerned about is I want to make sure that they get a fair price and a good price for their businesses that have been there for years and years. So that I would say is one of my biggest concerns is making people move and making sure that they would find a place within Webster Groves or that they would be happy moving to. I want to know more about that. But I'm excited and I'm honestly thankful that the developers have come to Webster trying to figure out how they can make this big development maybe happen. And we said, you know, when the YMCA came, the L on Lockwood, they wanted 5 stories. And we ended up saying, no, you could have 3. And so things change like, you know, over time or with all of these conversations. So there's gonna be lots of changes, but I want to say most likely yes to the original, to like the beginning of this. So yeah.
Mara, are you able to answer questions at this point or no? I know it's good.
I am as staff, I'm able to answer questions.
As it relates to the stream setback, so when Rolling Ridge came by last year before for a development plan that never went through, there was a strict requirement there, right? Is that not the same here because it's different, or it is the same here, or how does it, is it just a map issue?
So it's 2 different things. One is what they were planning to do was not touch the stream, not make improvements to the stream. They just wanted to build all the way up to the stream.
Okay.
With both building and paved area. Because of the overlap with if the improvements are being made to the floodplain and floodway, and if they do want to go before the Army Corps of Engineers, there are a couple options in the code that allow them to make changes and not necessarily follow the stream buffer requirements.
Okay.
Again, that's it's
I know
not
separate, but
yeah, it's a separate piece. There is a section that says that if you're going over an area, so like a roadway going perpendicular, things like that are allowed. But other elements are not supposed to be. You're supposed to stay 50 feet away from that top of bank.
okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, I don't think any of us are adverse. You know, we're not anti-development. we want this development, or we want some type of development. The question is whether we can put recommendations into a zoning ordinance that are going to be good for the community and, you know, not hurt us in the long run. And we have to think of the big picture here. At least I think we need to look at the big picture here. And so I don't think any of us are anti-development. We want something to go there. Is this the development that should go there with the recommendations that staff has come up with?
Anybody else like to comment?
I don't, as far as the overall kind of viewpoint, I think I may make comments. I don't know if it's a proper, or I guess I would like to suggest a couple revisions to this ordinance, regardless of how I'm going to vote. And I assume this is a time to do that. There are 2 or 3 in particular I think are important. So I mean, I could go ahead and make those if that's something anybody wants to entertain.
We're nodding our head, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so 12D under tree preservation and landscaping, the amount of earthwork that's going to be done here is substantial. I would suggest adding line D that topsoil should be stockpiled and reused. And that's going to help your environmental aspect. Instead of just putting rocks back on top, you're actually putting useful topsoil. And perhaps it should even be amended. But I'd suggest at least D, topsoil should be stockpiled and reused.
Are you 12B, Mike?
He's creating a 12D.
12D.
Reference to B.
Yeah, that'd be a new one. It'd be a new line. Right after the silver cells. So just stockpiles. Then under the traffic study, maybe it's somewhere else under item 15. It just kind of say updated traffic counts. I'm not seeing anyone here, and maybe it's elsewhere already, but traffic study signed and sealed by an engineer registered in the state of Missouri, indicating no adverse impact from the development.
Mike, I'm not sure we'll be able to get away with no adverse impact.
There's already
the
standard.
Right.
That's not the standard, right?
Or perhaps any adverse impact to be mitigated.
Again, you have a study done by a certified engineer. Traffic isn't, my recollection is that she is a certified traffic study engineer. And so she's giving you the standard that I think she can give you, Mike, in terms of her response.
The study wasn't sealed. She's, as it was mentioned, I'm familiar.
Mike?
She's
Mike?
a licensed engineer. Her study should be licensed.
So
Yeah.
Mike, typically they don't sign and seal it directly until it comes with the final development plan. So a
Okay.
final traffic study integrating anything else that might be in the ordinance would be required to be provided with the final development plan. And it would be signed and sealed at that time.
Okay, so that'll be part of final development plan. That'll have to be sealed.
Correct.
And then the last one I would suggest on 17, we talk about the Clomer. And maybe it again be in the final development ordinance or whatever, but they should be required to complete the Lomer, not just stop at the Clomer, but complete the Lomer. It'll be like 17E, Lomer should be provided.
So Mike, typically in the ordinance, we wouldn't necessarily, yes, you are correct. The LOMAR would be required, but that's required in order to close all building permits. That's required in order to finish and complete the development. We were putting in just the timing of the CLOMAR to tie it into when we would need it in order to continue to move forward. The LOMAR would be just tied into what our normal codes would be, which would be that it would be required in order to close out all permits, give occupancy, to finalize everything that's being constructed.
I thought it might be. I just wanted to ask. And then I don't see mentioned anywhere in particular I guess it's not covered. If they get the 401, 404, the stream buffer ordinance, the 50 feet is waived. So that doesn't need to be covered, or is it covered somewhere and I missed it?
So right after the CLOMAR, so item number 17, C is in cat. 17C has obtaining the 404 and the 401.
Okay, right.
We've got a 12D. Is that right, Mike? You want to put a 12D in? Mike? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry?
You want to put a 12D in, stockpiling topsoil? Is that what it was?
Yeah, topsoil shall be, topsoil from site shall be stockpiled and replaced. Or however, better to word that, but the idea is that you rip off the top useful topsoil and reuse that instead of putting what's on the bottoms on top, and that's a great environmental benefit.
I have no.
And that's common in these
I
developments.
don't
anymore.
have any idea about that.
I've heard of it being done in particular developments. I feel like our arborist had maybe put something in there. However, we haven't done testing of the soil, depending on what all has been on the different areas of the land. So I'm a little wary. I mean, it could be something you could be encouraged, but not required, because if we require it, and let's just say, some of the topsoil in the area by Red Lemoore or on some of the ones that had industrial uses in the past, we don't know what environmentally is in some of the soil until those samples are taken.
Put that
Yeah, with those uses out there, some fairness to that.
Make an amendment to the ordinance, the proposed ordinance.
So Mike, we could put in that we encourage that the topsoil be stockpiled and reused if it's able to be.
Yeah, this is something I think at least you're getting the right direction. That's just a massive, well, you're making 60 feet a cut. I'm sure what's under 60 feet isn't fit to be topsoil.
I'm not sure.
At least that downhill
Making a
side.
motion to amend or not.
So I'd make that motion to amend to include topsoil to be used as possible. Topsoil to be used as.
Is there a second? I think the motion's going to die for lack of a second.
I can second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to add a paragraph 12D. I guess we should vote on this before we vote on anything else. To add a 12D that basically says that they will stockpile and use this topsoil if possible, practical. Is that about right, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion about?
Well, we're talking about being environmental. That's just like one example of how we can reuse. So I'm all for that. If it's possible, yes. It's a great idea.
Sorry, I don't.
Make it more specific about what it's soil.
I would need to do some more research. I'm not comfortable throwing out some language right now, because again,
that we could have and it be amended?
We're gonna vote on this tonight. We're voting on this tonight.
So there's no like just administrative language.
So I'm sorry, what do you think you're looking for? I'm sorry, I was a little sidetracked by it. It keeps locking up on us. So I was working with the Zoom. So say the question one more time,
Yeah,
please.
so the recommendation is to add topsoil soil should be stockpiled and reused if practical. It's just, I mean, they can just say, oh, that's not practical. So basically, I guess it's just encouraged then at that point.
I think at this point it's encouraged. I mean, if we had to go through the whole thing of, if it's this, I don't know if I want to put in that we have to have someone else environmentally tell us whether it is. I'm not comfortable at this time. I don't have enough information to guide you. Sorry.
Okay.
Anybody else want to comment on this? It's been moved and seconded to add 12D to stockpile topsoil if practical. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
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 Guess we better do a voice vote here. Here's my list. Maddie, how'd you vote?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Jeff?
Nay.
Tony?
Yes.
Chris?
Nay.
Annie?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And chair voted nay. I think it passed. Is that right? All right, so 12D is added to the proposed ordinance. Is there anybody else who wants to propose anything to add to the ordinance?
Either modify 20 to add compost or to add it separately.
And where would you like to add that?
Either add opportunities for recycling and composting to be provided to development or it could be its own.
What would you like to?
Can everyone speak back into the microphones again? They're having trouble hearing.
What would you like? I mean, just tell us how you want it to.
Let's just make it simple and add it to 20 for recycling and composting.
Is there a second?
A second.
Could you repeat what it was?
Composting added to number 20. Recycling and composting. Is there any discussion? It's been moved and seconded to add and composting to item 20 on the proposed ordinance. So sort of read opportunities for recycling and composting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there anyone opposed? I don't think we need to do a let's vote on that. All right. Any other amendments people want to propose?
I'm not sure if solar panels would be considered part of that, and obviously they can't be installed underground. So I was just looking for a place to consider adding solar panels or anything. So if anyone else feels like an amendment could be added somewhere. to include the use of solar.
So the code does allow for solar, just in general. So it would probably just be, I don't, unless you're trying to require it, it's allowed. So it's allowed to be used. So are you encouraging it? Are you?
I'd like to find a way to whether the way I proposed is the best way I would say.
So if that were the case, I would suggest you add it to section 10, which is architectural. Laura, what's your thought? would probably be its own freestanding, which would say the use of solar panels
Are encouraged.
are encouraged.
That would probably help because I know the ARB has been looking at solar panels, especially in its ties to how it is viewed and the historic district. So that would probably be a good section if you were going to encourage the use of solar panels.
And sustainability will like that.
So this would be under 10E and it's a new subparagraph E. Maddie, if I'm stating this incorrectly, please tell me that it would say the use of solar panels is encouraged.
Yes.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion on this?
So just one last thing, just to clarify, a lot of the discussion at ARB is whether it's visible or not visible. So you might want to define encouraging solar and whether there is a visibility issue. Is it on the roof? Is it something that's just clarifying that?
Could also let the ARB decide that part of it.
You can. I just wanted to clarify since we are in the architectural section.
That would not extend above the 15-foot.
Correct.
Already on top of the roof.
Correct.
But they couldn't anyway, could they?
What?
Solar panels. I mean, they.
So probably if you're going to do that, you would want it, just to clarify, in the height section where it says chimneys, cooling towers, elevator bulkheads, you would probably want to include and solar panels. So item 5D.
Now we're moving this?
No. I'm just saying for the height regulation that Jeff had a question on, just to be really clear that they can't extend above the item that we've already discussed in case they are not flat on the roof, in case they are, at an angle of some manner to get the sun, that you would not be taller than the 15 feet. So we already have chimneys, cooling towers, other necessary mechanical appurtenances. I would add solar panels there, but then still keep under item 10, which you discussed, item suggesting adding E, use of solar panels is encouraged.
This is your motion, Maddie, so.
Yep, so the suggestion, my motion is to add this. Or everyone okay to do this again?
I think we could do it together.
Suggestion is, proposal is to add it to use of solar panels is encouraged. And amend 5D to say chimneys, cooling towers, elevator bulkheads, fire towers, solar panels, or other necessary mechanical.
So.
I'll still second.
All right. Is there just more discussion on solar panels?
I'm not sure I heard the exact motion, but I do believe the developer mentioned they went into green roofs. So I don't know that I'd push, depending how it's worded. I think we want to leave the opportunity to both provide environmental benefits. I don't know. It's hard to say one's better than the other.
I think the applicant stated that they would use solar panels if it worked out for them, in terms of their design. I believe they stated that this evening.
Where was it going to go? What item? Again, I'm not sure. I heard.
10E would state that use of solar panels is encouraged. And 5D. Am I right about 5? Yeah, 5D would insert the word solar panels for height.
Thank you.
Limitations. That's the motion that's been seconded.
Thank you.
All right, we ready to vote on that? All right, all those in favor of motion to add, let's set paragraph 10E and modify 5E. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Don't hear anybody opposed? All right. We have any other amendments to the proposed ordinance? We ready to take a vote on this?
I have one more question for Neil. Neil, if the final development plan comes back to this commission, do we use those 5 points to review again, or that's right? You
No,
just wanted to clarify.
Different standard,
Yep.
right?
Thanks.
One of the things that we talked about was the height. And that was a lot of concerns. I understand that they've submitted something saying that's not feasible.
Maddie, can I have you speak again into this? Sorry.
One of the concerns, oh, you know what, my mic is off. I thought I was really close to it for it to not work. Okay. One of the concerns that we talked about was the height and the of the buildings, of which the maximum was 80 feet. And I understand that we had something submitted to us today talking about the affordability or feasibility about reducing that. But I don't know if it's something that we want to discuss.
What are you proposing that?
I'm
we lower the
proposing a
height?
discussion.
Talk about it.
Yeah. I'm just proposing a discussion.
Okay.
I mean, I think that they've made a case that this is what they need, and if they were going to make any changes, they probably would have already done so by now, so it is what it is, I think. Unless we decide otherwise.
I'm not in favor of making it lower the height of these buildings. I don't think we have the knowledge to do that. We don't know how that would affect the financial aspects of this plan.
I mean, I guess I would say better a plan that's bigger than we want than a plan that's unsuccessful. I could rather have no plan than an unsuccessful plan.
But I think it would put it in their court as to whether or not they can do it or not. Just like the L wanted 5 and they couldn't do it, and they did it for 3. So it's a hard, I mean, I know what we're reading, but I don't know.
Well, we don't know anything other than what we've read or heard.
Right. So we can say we only want it this many feet high. I just don't.
Yeah,
know.
we can, sure. I don't think I'm in favor of doing that.
I kind of feel like the question's been put to the developer. And as much as I would probably like to do that, kind of back to what Neil said, I think we've kind of got something to vote on. And from what the developer said, if you give him less, he's not going to be able to do it. So if you take him at his word, that doesn't necessarily help him out, so to speak. So at least, it kind of gets an answer if we don't just leave what it is, as much as I'd like to change it. And
Yeah, I think we need to vote on what's before us, not make a significant change like that. I would just muddy the issue.
I agree. All right. We're still open for other suggestions. Anybody has them? All right, is there a motion on 21 PC 04?
I'll make a motion to approve 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill.
Is there a second? You can second and.
I will
vote
second,
to
I will
approve.
second.
You don't have to vote to approve because you second. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Nay?
No,
Hey,
All right, Maddie, how'd you
I
vote?
opposed.
I'm sorry.
I think Michael said he was opposed.
yeah, I'll just do a roll.
Okay. I voted yes.
Steve? I vote yes. Jeff?
I have concerns about the scale. We're not, it's not in front of us. I have concerns about eminent domain very much. But based on what's in front of us, I believe the plan is better to move forward with something for Webster than nothing. So I vote yes.
Tony?
it's not an anti-development vote, it's just like
Christopher?
Nay.
Annie?
Yes, and I ditto exactly what Jeff said. If you could read
Michael?
verbatim what Jeff said. That was
Michael?
perfect.
I vote no.
And chair votes no. What did we come out at? 4? Okay. So that is not a negative recommendation to city council.
It is not a negative recommendation.
Nor is it a positive.
It just goes forward to them.
That's right.
It
It
goes
goes to
forward to
them.
them.
It goes forward for
That's right.
city council can wrestle with
That's
it now. All right, we got any other business?
I have no other business this evening.
Thank
Might
goodness.
get some sleep, just a little sleep.
It's the way.
Mara, is the daycare coming back?
No, we don't have them coming back at this time.
Okay.
We have talked with them about some other options and some other locations to possibly look at, but there is nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you.
The play days.
If I just like say, it's hard on the Zoom for me. And I've been on too many meetings and on Zoom and councils and stuff, but I really appreciate Charles, how he runs the meetings and everything. I just want to say, especially with my hearing loss, I really appreciate you, man.
Here, here.
Appreciate your comments.
I know I speak on behalf of everyone with the city. What you do, of course, is of critical importance, but the manner in which you do it is just as important as what you do. And again, you've not only, of course, done everything that you've been asked to do, you've done it well, and you've done it politely. I'd also, again, just want to take a moment to congratulate Mara and Danny on the fine job that they've done in making sure that you have as much information as you can. There have been lots of conversations about making sure that you get as much as you can possibly get, because they knew, and everyone does, that this has been a tough decision for you all. So again, thank you.
And I totally agree with you. The staff has done an excellent job. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very happy.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
When's our next meeting?
Second.
Next meeting is October 11th. Just as a reminder, it's the second Monday.
Okay.
And we've not received any applications for anything on the outside. Do know we had on the books that we were supposed to bring you a couple new text amendments. So we might at least just briefly talk to you about an upcoming text amendment that we had in the works that we were going to get started on.
Mara,
Sorry.
I know you're plenty busy. We
Trees. It's the tree ordinance. Yeah.
We're good at tricks.